Welcome back. The Conservatives are demanding a new right for parents to know what their children are being taught in schools.
Staggering that you'd have to think they have to ask this, but it comes as we discover some schools are teaching children about the fact there are 100 genders, so we're asking this. So should gender ideology be taught at school at all?
We're now joined by the founder of See Change Happen, Joanne Lockwood, and journalist Helen Joyce. Thank you so much for joining us. Joanne, do you think there's any justification for children being taught that there are more than two sexes at school?
I think it's important that our young people are educated on contemporary issues, what's going on in the world. I mean, in a report earlier you had on about the Holocaust, and quite clearly LGBTQ plus people were victims of the Holocaust, along with people who are Jewish. So when people are hearing this in the news about these various different gender identities, it's important that they get to understand the way of the world, because just because the current Conservative government or the Republican government across the water want to erase transgender people, the reality is we are here.
This isn't about erasing transgender people. It's about telling the truth to children. And there are only two sexes, and people are not born in the wrong body. So why would you tell that to a child in a school?
You're presuming that that's the message that they're giving. I mean,
I've seen many of these materials. It absolutely is the message that they're giving.
Well, there's certainly not 100 genders that I'm aware of. You know, there may be some niche genders that people keep talking about, but yeah, all these numbers are scaremongering. I think it's every child's right to be educated on contemporary issues. And I think it's important to understand that people who are transgender exist, what gender identity is, and so that they can find their own sense of self. In the same way we talk about sexuality, being straight, being non-trans, all these kind of words, because this is the language that they're picking up at the playground. We can ignore it, or they'll just do their own discovery.
Before we bring Helen into the conversation, Joanne, can I ask you, what age do you think it is appropriate to start teaching children this stuff?
I mean, we already have sex education, PHSE education, decisions have been made on when that's appropriate. When children become inquisitive about their own identity, I don't have a specific age in mind.
You must have an idea.
But there are... Well,
are we talking 5, 6?
The education professionals have already said that PHSE, I'm not sure, was that start at the age of 10, 11, 12, at the point where people start becoming sentient about their own sense of self? Yeah, we shouldn't ignore the topic.
Helen, is this just a case of making sure that children are up to date?
I would make a couple of quick points. One is that you don't have to tell children that things are true to tell people that some people believe them. So schools are going to have to tell children that there are Muslims, there are Catholics, there are Jewish people, and so on. You can say that there are people who believe that they have an inner sense that doesn't align with their sexed bodies without actually suggesting that you believe that this is really a thing, any more than you think that, you know, people have souls or that they're reincarnated. But secondly, I think you have to remember that children are very suggestible, and that if you suggest to children that it is possible to be in some sense different from the actual body that you are, you will have created dis-ease in some children who wouldn't otherwise have had it. And thirdly, children do start RSE, relationships and sex ed, in their first week at school. And what's appropriate in primary school at the level of, you know, some children have two mummies, some children have two daddies, just because they are going to meet people who have gay parents. Nothing more than that in primary school. Absolutely not lots of genders. You can have a gender that's different from your sex. That's all just not appropriate developmentally at that age. And yet we are seeing that. We are seeing children told that their sex is assigned at birth, that people can be born in the wrong body, suggest selling the idea of transition, as in surgical transition. None of that should be in schools at all, and it certainly shouldn't be in primary schools.
There's another concerning aspect to this. Of course, we're talking about telling children that it is possible to be a different gender to your sex. That's one area of concern. But it's also about how children are taught to behave towards people who claim that they have a different gender to their biological sex. And what I'm really concerned about is particularly girls being told that they shouldn't challenge, say, a man in their changing rooms or a boy in their toilets because that is unkind. Joanne, do you think that's actually setting up girls to put themselves in danger for the so-called purpose of being kind?
I think, again, what you're doing here is you're using these very obtuse type comments to try and paint trans people as some sort of predators and going
I'm
into
trying to
changing
say
rooms.
that there's a reason that we have single-sex spaces, and if girls are socially conditioned not to uphold those single-sex spaces, we are going to have a huge safeguarding challenge.
Well, I think it's important that we create environments where people are understood. And if we're not careful, what happens is children grow up whispering and making their own stories up. So it's important that the education we're providing around gender identity, even non-trans people, about understanding your sense of self, I think is really important. I think schools today are doing a far better job than they did when I was younger in the 60s. So I'm not an education profession specialist in this area, but I would advocate that education needs to represent the real world, and trans people are in the real world. If it means making girls more aware of their own sense of self, empowering them, giving them, working with them to.
Helen,
so
how is this empowering girls?
Say again?
I just said, moving on to Helen, how is this empowering girls?
This language of empowerment is not the right starting point when you're talking with children. Adults and children have totally different duties and responsibilities and rights and needs. In schools, it's up to the grown-ups to set rules that keep everybody safe. It's not possible to keep everybody safe if you pretend that some boys can be girls and some girls can be boys. That doesn't mean being mean or unkind to the children who have these ideas about themselves. You do your best to support and accommodate, but you must keep all children safe. No child is safe if single-sex spaces are in name only and you allow a child of one sex to go into the spaces of the other. It's not safe for that child, it's not safe for other children. That should be a hard line that grown-ups hold. What you do secondarily to support the children who have this terrible idea that they have to be able to break rules that were there for everybody's safety, dignity and privacy is the secondary consideration after the primary consideration of setting the rule that is for everybody.
Fascinating.
Again, can I take issue with that safety, dignity and privacy? That's, again, painting trans people as some sort of predator. We're not predators. I'm not a predator.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I think it's very clear Helen didn't say that.
Language, what we're doing here is we're painting, again, this trope that mixed sex spaces are predatory and dangerous.
OK, we'll come back to this after the weather, but we're going to have to move to the weather now. Joanne, Helen, thank you.